Hey, it's Amy Newmark. I'm off for another week of working on my book, Chicken Soup for the Soul, Maverick with a Mission. It's coming out in October and I have to finish it. So this week, we're going to replay our second week of the Chicken Soup for the Soul podcast. These are episodes that ran in late February and early March. Chances are you haven't heard these yet, so I hope you'll enjoy them.
Changing your life one story at a time. This is the Chicken Soup for the Soul podcast with Editor-in-Chief Amy Newmark.
Hey, it's Amy Newmark with your daily dose of Chicken Soup for the Soul inspiration. This podcast is the way that I get to share with you some of my favorite tips and stories. And I get to select these stories from more than 20,000 in our Chicken Soup for the Soul library. We always say that we're changing your life one story at a time, and I know these stories have changed my own life, so it's great to share them with you. It's Tuesday, and I like to call this Tip Tuesday, and I like to pass along the best tips from our stories. These are actionable ideas that I think you can use. They're ideas that are simple and universal, and I'm going to tell you one today that I never would have thought of on my own. It's from a story called What If You Won the Lottery by J.C. Sullivan, and it appeared in a very cool book we have called Chicken Soup for the Soul, Find Your Happiness. This book is filled with stories about people finding their purpose in life and realizing that they can pursue their passions and finding their true path to happiness. So J.C. was definitely not on her path to happiness. She hated her job, and she was whining to her brother one day, I have no idea what I want to do. I cannot stand banking. And her brother made a great suggestion. He said, well, imagine that you just won the lottery. What would be the first thing you'd do? And JC blurted out, oh my God, I would move to Italy. She had dreamed of living there since she was a kid. And her brother said, then do it. Move. I'm sick of hearing that you hate your job. I'll come and visit you in Italy. So JC, of course, went into denial right away and said, I can't do it. I have a ton of debt. But her brother didn't want to hear about it. He just told her to focus. He said she should start saving. She should do whatever it took to get out of debt. And she should focus on her goal, moving to Italy. I thought that was such a great lesson. And I found a quote about this from Henry Ford, who, of course, overcame a lot of obstacles. And he said, obstacles are those frightful things you see when you take your eyes off your goal. So the point is, focus on your goal, not on those obstacles, and they'll just become little things along the way, often your side vision. So JC focused on her goal. She threw all her energy into getting out of debt. She stopped carrying cash. She put her credit cards in the freezer. I have to digress for a moment. I have heard this so many times, putting the credit cards in the freezer. Why does that work? I put brownies in the freezer all the time so that I won't eat them, and then my husband and I go and we get them out of the freezer and we eat them really cold. But anyway, it worked for her, and maybe it will work for you. She put her credit cards in the freezer, and she saved her money. She paid down her debt, and she started practicing her Italian. She was focused on that goal of moving to Italy. Her work stress diminished because she knew her job was going to end. And she even started playing these really positive mind games with herself. She packed a suitcase months ahead of time, and she put her passport inside it, all ready to go. And every time she walked by that suitcase and she saw that passport sitting in there, it made Italy even more real for her. And then the day came, and she had actually achieved her goal, and she was debt-free, and she even had a little cash to take with her, and she was off to Milan. She says in her story, I didn't know what would happen in Italy, but one thing was for sure. Even on its worst day, it had to be more interesting than my boring life as a stressed-out, debt-ridden banker. I just love this idea. All you have to do is sit back and imagine what would you do if you won the lottery, and you will actually have a much more clear vision of what you want to do with your life. What JC says in her story is, my imaginary lottery win forced me to listen to my inner voice. That imaginary lottery ticket turned into a real plane ticket. Deciding to move was a turning point in my life. My brother Sean knew that money had always been my obstacle. He simply removed money from the discussion. and asked me to envision a different reality. Because so many of us use money as an excuse not to do something. And she continues and says, I love this way of thinking, and I still use it when I'm trying to decide on my next steps in life. So I was really impressed by her idea. And then I realized something. I remembered something from when I was 20, and I was traveling around in the northeast of Brazil. I was interviewing poets for my senior honors thesis in college. And you know what I used to ask them as a way of getting to know them and cutting right through to who they really were? I would say to them, what would you do if you won the lottery? And I had completely forgotten that that was my way of reaching into that person and getting his or her true essence. So I remember now that dreamy look they would get on their faces. They really would get in touch with whatever their true path to happiness was. Imagine what you would do if you won the lottery. It's a great tip. It's a great way to figure out what you really want in your life. Thank you for listening. That was my tip. I'm Amy Newmark, and I do really enjoy sharing these stories with you. I am getting remotivated myself. I can never read these stories often enough. And the next time we get together, I'm going to share another awesome story with you. And this is one that proves that truth really is stranger than fiction. If you've ever wondered about ESP or you've experienced it yourself, you're going to be fascinated by this next podcast. And if you'd like to read more stories and tips from the book I mentioned today, Chicken Soup for the Soul, Find Your Happiness, go to our website, chickensoup.com.